Hey everybody, keeping with the recent trend that's been going on, I'll be going through Taiwan Semiconductor today. So just did Intel, just went through AMD. I'm going to keep with semiconductors for a little bit while they're kind of the highlight of attention in the world at the moment. So I think Taiwan Semiconductor is mainly focused on purely semiconductor production and things like wafer semiconductors, integrated circuits, chips in general. They're mostly focused on just manufacturing of those chips, which obviously is massive in the world overall. But definitely a larger company. I usually don't do super big companies like this, but since they are such a highlight on the world right now, I'm going to go through them. So we're going to look through financials, a little bit into their earnings, a little bit into their chart, and basically just get a general idea of the financial strength of the company, as well as a little bit of what they've been doing recently and how they've been growing. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe. I make these videos basically every day of the week. And yeah, let's get into TSM. So starting off with Taiwan Semiconductor, just so you get a little bit more information on the company to start with. Integrated circuits, wafer semiconductor devices. Its chips are used in PCs, peripheral products, info applications, communications products, and systems products. Automotive, industrial equipment, basically every single thing that could possibly use semiconductors, they make semiconductors for all kinds of electronics, anything with small computers in them, they are working on. So, just under $900 billion market cap, a dividend yield of 1%, which is fine, especially for a company like this. Very much growing a ton recently. So, that's fantastic. Another thing, target price is at just about 250, long-term growth rate at 22%, which right now we are at 201 for the stock price. So overall, that is pretty good. Um, a lot of upside here. They're valuing them well over $1 trillion for the company, which again is well over that's basically a 25% gain from where the target price is. So looks fairly positive there. Looking into their growth summary, you could see almost across the board, other than a little bit of short term pain, long term estimates are phenomenal, especially free cash flow at 19%. That is huge. Clearly, very, very positive future for the company. Also, 15% 10-year CAGR for dividend growth is excellent, especially if you're planning on holding for a long time. That is really good. So now let's get into the financials, starting off with their income statement. We'll kind of take a look at where their sales have been going recently, as well as a little bit of their profitability. So this is over the past few quarters, and you can see their quarterly sales have exploded over the past 2 years, even with going from right around, I'm assuming this is in billions. Just based on the fact that, of course, it's not popping up for me right now, but this should be in billions of dollars, which unfortunately it's not popping up, but that's fine. So going from right around 70 billion a quarter in 2022 to now at 90 billion in revenue in their past quarter is insane. Even just that 2 year growth is massive. And we could see here a little bit of a better visualization of their sales growth. So overall, it has been enormous, to say the least. And again, that was in billions. So just going from actually, they took a bit of a dip in 2023, which is perfectly fine just based on where their sales are now. That is meaningless at this point, but humongous amounts of sales growth. You could also see operating income is massively at an all-time high, and their net income is again also hugely positive. Um, Still keeping up with their growth even from 2022. They may have lost a little bit in terms of their margins, but overall, with that much revenue, I think that's perfectly fine. Um, Now let's take a look at their overall shares, which so far for 2024, they don't have them yet. So let's go back to their quarters and get a bit of an idea of where their total shares are heading. So total shares outstanding, we'll go with the basic, are mostly just about staying the same. They're not changing at all, which is totally fine. No dilution, no repurchasing, perfectly fine. Doesn't need to be happening. So I'm just going to pass by that one because there's no changes. Overall, for their assets, they are at 204 billion with a B dollars in assets, which is enormous. Property, plant, and equipment is at an all-time high. Actually, it is not at an all-time high. They had an all-time high in 2023, and they are still massively outperforming with their sales. So clearly doing excellent here, even with a decrease in their net property, plant, and equipment, which is perfectly fine. 73 billion in cash. I'm assuming, yeah, very little debt here. They do, of course, have $28 billion in long term debt, but compared to their cash, that is perfectly fine. Honestly, in my opinion, which obviously they could be preparing to do some large acquisitions or some large expansions within the company, that's definitely a possibility. But at the same time, why wouldn't they just pay off their long term debt and have that burden taken away? But you could see it has decreased very significantly over 2024 from 31 billion to 28 billion. So that is something there, of course. And their short term debt is essentially nothing, very, very minimal. So overall, their balance sheet looks very positive across the board. Now, heading into their cash flows, operating cash flows look fantastic, massively at an all time high for 2024. Um, Far, far surpassing what it was during that last solid quarter they had, which I believe was March or December, their past quarters, but massive increases from the last one, which is fantastic. Also, their investing activities are across the board negative, which is to be expected and perfectly fine. A huge increase in capital expenditures, though, within the past quarter, which isn't necessarily a very good thing. Obviously, with the way their sales have been increasing, that's just something that happens. But at the same time, it should not have a almost $6 billion increase in capital expenditures within one quarter. That is kind of rough, but for now, it's perfectly fine considering their free cash flow is still positive. Moving on, we can see their financing activities, and they have actually been consistently issuing debt every single quarter, um, which is fine. But at the same time, we saw their debt decreasing overall. So they could just be going through other funds, something like that as well. But overall, I think their debt situation is perfectly fine. No real issues there at all, even with consistent issuance like this. And again, very little changes in their capital stock overall. This is just if they're repurchasing or selling stock, which they did do a small repurchase 2 quarters ago, which is good, but overall, very little changes. And then, like I said a second ago, their overall free cash flow is fantastic, massively positive, consistently positive, other than one quarter in 2023 where they did see a decrease. But overall, you could see they have been enormously positive since then. So all of that is perfectly fine. Let's head into the ratios now. I'm expecting to see a bit of a decrease in their profitability ratios, which we do have their 2024 numbers here, which is good. So they are consistently above 5 year average for their gross margin, above it for operating margin, and also above for net margin. So across the board, I was wrong. Their profitability is looking phenomenal. And another thing, ROA, ROE are both also, again, very, very positive, which is fantastic. Now let's take a look at their quarters and kind of see how 2024 evolved overall. So going from 52 to 56% gross margin, 38 to 40 and a half their net margin, those increases are fantastic. And you can see from 2023, their overall net margin has decreased, which is totally fine. Um, Sort of expected, honestly, with the huge amount of sales growth they have, but their sales growth is massively outpacing the decrease in their net margin in that time period. So, absolutely no problems there. Everything looks fantastic. One other thing is their debt ratio, which you can see is at 21%. That's very healthy. Anything above 80 to 100% is a very healthy debt to equity ratio. So, that is perfectly fine, especially considering it has decreased now for basically 6 quarters straight, 7 quarters straight. So looks phenomenal there. Everything looks very good. Now let's move over into their recent earnings and we can kind of see a little bit more. And of course, we do have fiscal year 2024, which is good. We could see their metrics recap for quarter 4 first, which honestly, there isn't too much information here. So it's looking like I'm going to have to find another thing. We do have street takeaways, which is probably the most important thing we want to look at. So starting off, quarter 4 performance reflected a strong demand for their advanced nodes. Gross margins were widely seen as remaining resilient, supported by higher productivity and utilization rates, which is fantastic to see. Target to maintain a gross margin above 53% for 2025 is incredibly positive, especially considering if we go back here to their ratio analysis and we look at their current gross margin, right around average 53% is where they're at currently, and that is a phenomenal place to be. You can see their 5-year average is 53%. So that being a target for 2025, including the massively increased sales they recently had, that is a very solid target for them to have. And again, signaling confidence in operating efficiency and the pricing strategy, despite plans for a low single-digit wafer price increase for major partners next year. So they are increasing their prices for their more major customers. So even still with that, they are expecting their gross margin to stay strong, which is very positive. Other than that, if you want to read through everything you can, I'm going to highlight some things with the analysts here as well. So 2025 beginning outlook looks in line, which is good. Quarter 4 results supported by strong demand, which is very good. Quarter 1 revenue declined due to seasonality of smartphone semiconductors, which is to be expected, but also the growth in AI will offset that, which is positive. Overall, everything looks good. Unfortunately, the estimates here are in Taiwanese dollars, I believe, so I don't know the exact conversion rate there, but overall, all of them are positive, maintains a buy, outperform, overweight, which is all very positive. So now let's take our own look at the stock price here, and we can see they did have, I believe this is their year-to-date chart. Currently, they did have that very large drop yesterday with the overall market, a slight rebound today, not completely rebounded, but you could see how their stock price has been doing. I don't think we will see any problems long term with this company. I do believe we are at the point in the company where they're reaching their overall fair value, with their valuation nearing $1 trillion. I don't think there is too much more room for growth. Again, if you watch my portfolio updates, which I usually put out on my own personal portfolio once or twice a week, I am not the biggest fan of mega cap companies like this, only because there is not a ton of room for them to continue going up. Obviously, there could always be an NVIDIA situation where the company gains $2 trillion in market cap in a year or less. But overall, I think that more mature companies such as TSM are very solid investments, especially right now with essentially a free discount being given to everybody of 13% yesterday, with the whole market going down on what I'm going to call just overblown news. But overall, I don't think there is a ton of upside. I think that the company's future is very positive and they will continue to go up. But in terms of making more profit and growth faster, I don't think it's the best option. But overall, definitely a very solid company to own if you do own it. But I just don't like mega caps personally. But yeah, that's all I have for TSM. If you learned something, if you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe. I make these videos basically every day. So that's all I got. See you in the next one.